Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. That's you-know-what day on our calendar. But, of course, because everybody I know voted early, it's not really necessarily, it's not voting day, but it is election day. And it also is no longer probably the day that you will find out that, or who has won the election or how many members of Congress will be Republicans or Democrats. We will have to wait and see, probably for a long time to figure that one out. And we may not really even know because elections may have nothing to do with the outcome of how many Republicans and Democrats end up sitting in Congress. You know I'm panicking you about that. What do I think the odds are that they will, in fact, challenge a tremendous number of elections on the House floor? Well, historically, the odds are very long against it. This doesn't happen very often. But historically, how many Republicans have been running for office on a platform of election denial? Yeah, so you never know. The nightmare scenario, of course, I've outlined a number of times, is one in which the Republicans find themselves with a temporary functional majority, which I assume allows them to go forward with organizing, at least for the time being, until the election contests can be settled. And they can do so even if there is a potential Democratic majority still out there and just steal it away from them. Because, of course, ultimately, the decision on who gets to sit in Congress is up to whoever there's a general consensus ought to be sitting in Congress at the moment. And by majority vote, they can decide who will sit in the contested races. So, just wanted to scare the crap out of you. Today, we'll just focus on being scared about the actual results, either until they come out or, depending on what's going on and whether the counting is going the other way or there's just a lot of armed militia in the street saying we don't care what the count is. Because of that, we'll find out. Ha ha. What a day. All right. Well, we proceed with our usual rafto stories, not Greg's raft, because that doesn't come until tomorrow when we try and scramble and figure out exactly what happened today and in the month prior and all the counting that's going on. But Republicans are already gearing up to make their claims and challenges about elections being stolen because reasons, and that's what they need in order to bolster their story about what happened at the ballot box in Philadelphia. They continue to challenge the ability of local elections officials to count ballots that are undated on the mail-in envelopes, or even challenging their ability to try and cure those defects by contacting the people who sent in those ballots and seeing if they can get them to correct them before today's deadline. That, too, they think ought to be illegal. And, let's see, collection of a number of great stories and horrible stories from around the country and around the world. And if things are going well over at you-know-where, we can speak with you-know-who about you-know-what. And you know why we'll want to do that. And you'll know how, too. It's Skype, as long as that's working as well. We'll see whether everything is, let's see, going smoothly. I'll just say let's see a couple more times as well. But, yeah, I don't anticipate any problems, but you never know. And Joan McCarter, senior political writer, of course, at Daily Kos, tells us that the morning on Election Day isn't really the rush time, of course. It's in the evening when the results start coming in. But you never know, because you never know what's going on out there. So anyway, we're holding on for that last segment today. But in the meantime, as I said, time to fill the other segments with other stuff. Here's a story that caught my eye at the last minute just because, I don't know, somebody made a big deal out of it on Twitter. Twitter itself, of course, still a big deal, but things are kind of settling into what we'll call a routine pattern of chaos as we wait for Elon Musk to possibly implode and simply give up, or whether he lashes out at everybody and burns the whole place down out of spite. In the meantime, though, there's still circulating news on Twitter, and something that jumped out at me a little bit this morning is in South Dakota. I guess they've got a little bit of a little bit of an issue going on with a Republican state Senate candidate. Apparently, according to the Daily Beast, has a small problem in that he's been accused of grooming and repeatedly raping one of the members of his family. Because, as we know, every Republican accusation is a confession. So that sounds pretty good. Let's see. We have the Daily Beast's reporting on this. I mean, we don't typically have eyes on South Dakota state Senate candidates, but, wherever there's this sort of glaring Republican hypocrisy, I guess you ought to take a look. Ellie Quinlan, what is this? Houtailing? How does she pronounce this last name? Houghthaling. Houtailing? No idea. She's the breaking news intern. So she can break the news to me if she likes about how she pronounces her name, and I will announce it on the air. Just use that KITM hashtag for as long as that exists. Ellie, I can at least pronounce your first name. Joel Koskin, I'm guessing at that pronunciation too, is the name of the devil in question here. Koskan, a local, he's described as a local, he's local to South Dakota anyway. A local something, a local guy, I don't know, running for South Dakota State Senate in District 26 has been accused of years of child abuse in court documents. Koskin, who ran for the state Senate seat on the Republican ballot on 3 occasions dating back to 2018, is accused of sexually grooming and raping a family member. I know, good morning, how are you? Probably should have been trigger warning there. I'll never remember that. I just jumped straight into the shock. That's kind of the thing we do here. And, again, I mean, I bring it up not so much for the shock value as the hypocrisy value, that specifically what he's doing is in fact sexually grooming and then molesting a family member. And it's, of course, horrific all on its own, but, in combination with the fact that Republicans are making a widespread practice of running around accusing Democrats of doing this, which is kind of ridiculous to, make a party label out of it. Although it's getting to the point where I'm thinking maybe it's a Republican crime after all. My Republican squad thread on Twitter grows to now hundreds of entries in length. Not all of them are sexual abuse cases, but a fair number of them actually are. And I think that's weird. Well, he was charged on Thursday, I guess last Thursday. What's the date on this article? November 3rd. So, yeah, okay, last Thursday, with 1 count of exposing a minor to a foreseeable harm. That's a very mild charge at the moment. The allegation against Joel Koskin is very serious, and the South Dakota Republican Party unequivocally opposes child abuse in all forms. That's nice to know. That's from Dan Lederman, the chair of the South Dakota GOP. And they told, he told Kalo Land News. That's where he landed that statement. According to a signed probable cause statement, the victim claims that Koskin had been raping her since she was a young child. The prospective legislator allegedly instructed her to sit on his lap and kiss him from a young age, eventually installing cameras in her room, touching and raping her. What a wonderful fellow. You promised you'd never do this, Koskin texted her in May after discovering she had contacted authorities. Isn't that interesting? The big betrayal is hers for contracting authorities. This according to a Division of Criminal Investigation report. I'm begging you, victim, they blocked her name out here, you don't want to do this. Well, I'm begging you, victim, to keep going. You probably don't want to do this, but I hope that you find some healing and some justice in going ahead and doing so. It's not for him to tell you. You're not listening to the show, I know. No one I know is likely to know this person, but well, anyway, just generally, out in the universe, you should feel that. And it links at this point, the Daily Beast article. They didn't break the news or anything. They link to the Mitchell Republic, which I guess is the local paper, and they would have the right to say things like a local person is running for office, but okay. It's state-lined White River, South Dakota, in case you were looking for the nearest locality. And Hunter Duntman is the author of the piece at the Mitchell Republic. Considerably longer. I don't think there's any more news or details that will help you get a better grasp of what's going on here. I think you got the gist of it. But once again, every Republican accusation is in fact a confession, and that's not the only such story that I have this morning. There's also one more specific to a murdery Trader Green type accusation. You may recall that she very recently announced to the world the falsehood that Democrats want Republicans dead and that they've already started the killings. Do you recall that story? Well, I just thought perhaps you would want to hear more about this one. Oh, look, I see another thing that I tweeted about today using someone else's tweet. Matt Gertz's tweet, as a matter of fact, has been deleted at some point. So it'd be interesting to see why. It's a rare thing for him to be deleting a tweet like I was thinking of. But at any rate, back to murdery Trader Green. This one, a great save made here by Raw Story in pointing out what's actually happening here. The local original source, or at least original to Raw Story's reporting of it, and you know the Raw Story model, they'll pick up on these stories locally, and they'll give a national focus and bent to it in repeating the story and amplifying the story to a national audience. Sometimes doing a better job of it than the locals, sometimes not. It depends. But here, far and away, better job than the locals. And it's really, I guess it would dilute the impact if I read you maybe the thing to do is to read you the original story. And this doesn't give due credit to Raw Story for spotting what's wrong, but I think you'll see immediately what's wrong, and you'll say, there should be someone out there who's dedicated to righting this journalistic wrong. So keep in mind that Raw Story has done it, and we'll just credit them ahead of the fact for having done the right thing. And then instead, I will read you the original source that they used to pick up on this story, and the way they put the story, and then you will know, without my even reading you the Raw Story version of it, what happened or what got emphasized and what didn't. So this comes from the Journal News. What is the Journal News? Well, okay, it's a newspaper. It's Butler County's local news. Now, that's what it says. I mean, it doesn't have the word "it's" in it. That's their little motto here. Butler County's local news now. Which, the way I said it is like, well, what's the Journal News? Well, it's Butler County's local news now. Like, the good source of local news apparently has disappeared. Instead, they have this one. So not only do they report this story in a way that this is the ultimate buried lead. Sometimes you get the buried lead and it's 3-4 paragraphs into the story. Here, well, it's last, but that'll just keep you on the edge of your seat and listening until I get to the end of the story. But I'll also add, because I'm here, the reporting along the way is pretty terrible. I mean, I don't want to gang up. There's no gang here yet, but I don't want everybody. Don't all go and attack Lauren Pack. I'm sure she's got better things to do. You've got better things to do. Maybe she's brand new. I don't know. Maybe she's got years of experience. But for the Journal News, I imagine that the people who are really fantastic journalists at the Journal News probably move on to something else eventually. And maybe that will be her upward trajectory. Maybe she's just starting out and she'll pick up experience and move on to the New York Times, and we'll all be sorry. But here's the story. Man killed in the town of, I'm guessing, Okeana, Okeana, and I think this is Ohio. I'm picking up contextual clues along the way in reading all this stuff. that, I think when I read through this thing, I wasn't exactly sure where it was. I thought perhaps Butler County. I think there's a Butler County in Indiana, but I think this one is in Ohio. And maybe I don't know. We'll check later on, unless the answer is revealed here. And by the way, can I also mention, they have a mugshot of the person involved here. I guess I should tell you the headline. Man killed in Okeana shooting identified. Bond set for suspect. Ho hum. I mean, except for the man killed part, right? But even here in the United States of America today, that's kind of a ho hum headline. Man killed, suspect identified, bond set. By the way, as I was saying, the picture, his booking photo is here. And I got to tell you, the booking photo, I don't know. You could show me the original. There's no way you're going to make me believe that that's not an artificial intelligence generated picture of a person. This looks like a computer rendition of a murder suspect, and I don't know what to tell you about it. You got to see it for yourself. Anyway, the story goes like this. Bond was set Monday morning for a Morgan Township man arrested on suspicion of murder after his neighbor was found shot to death Saturday in Okeana. Now, I just got to know. It's, by the way, the way I'm saying Okeana makes it sound like it's in Japan, but it isn't. Okeana, Ohio, I think. Okeana, Ohio. Yes, Butler County. Terrific. How many people in Okeana? Well, one less, I guess, but just wondering. But it doesn't offer me the population up front in my quick Google search. All right. So, Bond set Monday morning. Guy found shot to death Saturday. Austin Green Combs, 26, he looks like he's artificial intelligence generated, was booked into the Butler County Jail at 8:25 p.m. Saturday. Bond was set at $950,000 Monday during a video arraignment at the Butler County Historic Courthouse. Historic. Good to know. They included these details. So good job by Lauren Pack to this point. Anthony Lee King, 43, died of multiple gunshot wounds, and his death was ruled a homicide, according to the Butler County Coroner's Office. Combs was taken into custody after deputies called for a shooting at 11:46 a.m. and found King dead outside, according to the sheriff's office. I mean, I think we can trust the sheriff's office on that point. Combs was armed with a gun, deputies said. That too. I mean, the facts fit, Lauren's not wrong. It's just not a great narrative to this point. Family members called 911 after hearing shots and finding King unresponsive and bleeding in the backyard. The family told the dispatcher, and here things start to fall apart. There are words missing. The family told the dispatcher neighbor had confronted him before, the neighbor, I guess, had confronted him before about some perceived political affiliation. My neighbor just shot my dad, a male tells dispatchers. So now this is reporting on I heard the tape of the 911 call, and this is how I choose to describe it. His father is in the backyard and he's not breathing, the son says. Like, wow, you could just quote, my father's in the backyard, he's not bleeding, unquote, the son says. But instead, it's descriptive of it and not a quote. His father is in the backyard and he is not breathing, the son says. Wow, okay. The suspect, quote, just walked back onto his property, he tells the dispatcher. According to the son, the neighbor, quote, has come over multiple times making statements. He's insane, unquote. The caller's mother is sobbing in the background. This is the color commentary now. The caller's mother is sobbing in the background, and the dispatcher tells them to stay inside and keep the doors locked. The victim's wife then tells the dispatcher they were cutting grass and working in the yard when she came inside to let the dog out. That's when she said she heard gunshots. Quote, I look in the backyard and that man is walking away from my husband and my husband is on the ground, the woman says. He has come over like 4 times confronting my husband, ready? Because he thought he was a Democrat. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to make light of this situation in this way, but I mean, Okay, and I mean, that may be the order in which they told the things to the dispatcher, but here's the story. He's come over 4 times confronting my husband because he thought he was a Democrat, and then the end of the quote is, why, please, I don't understand. And then the story wraps. Combs was taken into custody in a Jeep, important to know, at the Ohio 126 west of Chapel Road. Both Combs and his father were in the vehicle. The end. So, the story has been more or less accurately reported, I guess. Lauren chose an odd way of transcribing the 911 audio. But, yeah, so over at Raw Story, of course, the headline reads, Ohio man fatally shoots neighbor, quote, because he thought he was a Democrat, as Travis Geddes rearranges the story. A Southwest Ohio man shot and killed his neighbor because he believed he was a Democrat, according to the victim's family. And then we learn all the details that we learned in this piece here, and the quotes and the description. And Travis doesn't do anything, unfortunately, to repair, because he can't. He doesn't actually have the tape in front of him. So there's not too much he can do to repair the weird, odd way that the original reporter chooses to present the story, but that's it. And I mean, yeah, way buried, I would say. So anyway, you're reminded that Murdery Trader Green, of course, has insisted that it is Democrats who want Republicans dead, and that the killings have already begun, except the killings which have begun are Republicans killing Democrats, apparently, because they're Democrats. Whether they're Democrats or not, maybe it was a mistake. That's not clear from the reporting, and nobody does anything to clear that up, and I don't know whether the family should even be bothered with that at this point, nor expected to answer that question. It's not really relevant, well, in terms of the criminal charges anyhow, unless it becomes a hate crime at this point. Anyway, I found that interesting. The killings have begun, and once again, it turns out that they're telling you the actual opposite of what's really happening out there, but that's the Murdery Trader Green MO, inside and out. So there you go. I just found that rather surprising, to say the least. By the way, with respect to, what's his name, the pervert Republican who was just charged with child molestation, let's make sure we name him again, Joel Koskin, innocent until proven guilty, by the way, just figured I'd let you know. But the South Dakota Republican Party doesn't really want to mess with that either. They're just out there condemning him up front. But Rebecca Jacob sends along the following note on that piece. Also, his lawyer has worked out some deal to keep him off the sex offender registry. I don't know how where that comes from. Maybe from other reporting on the story, because apparently widely reported in South Dakota prior to our finding out about it today. But I don't think they're at that stage at the trial yet, unless he's been accused before and has somehow stayed off of the sex offender registry. Or maybe the charge that the police came up with initially just to be able to hold him doesn't include registration on the sex offender list, even if you're convicted. But that may be that, maybe the case that this is not eventually the only crime he faces trial on. Anyway, Rebecca's comment also goes on here to say, South Dakota also didn't charge the AG who murdered a pedestrian and tried to hide it. The law for thee and not for me, indeed. So, we'll see how that plays out in South Dakota. South Dakota Republicans may find that it's to their advantage eventually to get sanctimonious about things and sacrifice this guy, especially if he's a perennial legislative candidate who never wins anyway. Like, they can throw that guy under the bus pretty easily, and I assume that they'll go ahead and do that. But, even with the case of the Attorney General, even like Kristi Noem, as she gets set to try to, claim that she can run for president, has done her utmost to distance herself from that guy. That's the way they do it everywhere, and South Dakota is no different. All right, let's see. Other things that I thought were of interest. Oh, there's a good story. I mean, it's not a widespread political story. I did see this one, and Patrick Snyder has the same eye for the odd story. that I saw floating out there. This is just a random person reporting on Twitter. Turns out, says shenanigans _ love, L-U-V, shenanigans love, and I don't know who that is, just your average person hanging out on Twitter, maybe only for a few more minutes until Elon Musk drives her away. But she has this story to relate. Got to get the thing out of the way. Turns out my kids, along with over half of the high school, got the flu, in part because everyone got breathalyzed at homecoming, which, may or may not be a good idea. But they got breathalyzed at homecoming one after the other, and no one cleaned the breathalyzer all evening, essentially turning it into a super spreader event. Have we learned nothing? We have not. Of course, that's the that's the idea. And well, duh. And then they have, somebody else says they were using, this is interesting, they were using a no-contact breathalyzer, but they still got most of the kids sick, and that's because I think nobody knew how to use the breathalyzer. You're supposed to just blow into this cone, but everybody just put their mouth right on it, and voila! Well, I guess we didn't learn germ theory from COVID, but now everybody thinks, since I guess they think COVID's over, they think all communicable disease is over, and you don't have to do anything. But yeah, I thought we would have picked up a few pointers about how to deal with communicable disease instead. But I guess not. Humorous, and better than that, it fit in the amount of time that we had between the end of the previous story and our first break, which is coming now. So, if you haven't voted yet, you got 2 minutes to run out and get that done. It'll probably take you a little bit longer than that. You don't have to wait till the end of the show. You can listen to it as a podcast. Go now, if you haven't for some reason. So we'll be back in 2 minutes, and you can listen to the rest of the podcast after you voted. Good idea. Go. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So let's see, where to next? How about this story? This one, likewise, shared with me. Who sent me this one? Oh, that guy 3002, who is unfortunately likely to be among those making an exodus from Twitter. This was something he was discussing a couple of days ago. And we'll be sorry to see that happen. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like sometimes I like to hang around for these things just to see what the evacuation looks like. Anyway, the real reason is I want to know where to go next, and I want to find out where everybody's actually landing, whether it's going to be Mastodon or Counter Social or some other place, or there'll be some new invention or a new startup. And then, I don't know. Who knows? I don't know whether I'll have it in me to start all over again with another social media thing. Anyway, but that guy who entertains us all very often with his Simpsons insider commentary sends me this article, which I guess encompasses the latest in the Elon Musk drama. Elon Musk has discussed putting all of Twitter behind a paywall. That would be interesting. That'd be, I guess, the end of Twitter. As you know, of course, he's attempting to get everybody to agree to $8 per month charges for keeping a blue check mark for verification, something that he's calling, or he's adopted the name of something that the old Twitter management actually, I think, initiated called Twitter Blue, that was going to be some sort of premium service. And I think that they hadn't really settled on what exactly it was going to be. And he's just going to grab that and say, oh, it's the $8 verification charge. and who knows what else. Anyway, apparently he's also discussed putting the whole place behind, you can't read anything and you can't tweet unless you pay a monthly fee, which, it's something to consider if you're just starting Twitter, perhaps, or maybe Twitter is now becoming really popular, and there was a moment there at which you might have been able to say, people are kind of getting addicted to Twitter, and we might be able to extract some value from this. But for something people would want to use every day, you'd have to keep the price fairly reasonable. Otherwise, you just sabotage your user base. I mean, the fact or the value of Twitter is that everybody was interested in hanging around on Twitter, and that was because it was free. And when it's not free, that's going to change. Plus, of course, there's even a meme, among Twitter users that pops up all the time that people, when they're amazed at the strange things that they're able to see, they remind people, this website is free. And Elon Musk apparently considering maybe that shouldn't be the case. So that's the headline from The Verge. Elon Musk has discussed putting all of Twitter behind a paywall. So far, Twitter Blue is a mess and might even lose money. Well, I mean, this whole thing is going to lose money, obviously. I think that's just destiny. Casey Newton reporting this for The Verge. If Friday brought massive layoffs to Twitter, Monday brought fresh evidence that the company will never be the same. Musk has discussed, and he doesn't even bother calling him Elon in this one, Musk has discussed putting the entire site behind a paywall. Platformer has learned, I don't know what Platformer is, but it's some other publication dedicated to whatever crazy crap. I don't know. Anyway, meanwhile, the company is scrambling to lure back employees who it laid off mere hours ago. And some workers say the economics behind its soon-to-relaunch Twitter Blue subscription could actually lose the company money. All of this took place against the backdrop of a company that still has yet to hear anything official from Musk via email or a company-wide meeting. He just muses, and then rumors drop. Sometimes he drops them on Twitter. This is the way that Trump purported to be running the federal government. Very similar in that way. And they both have that same problem, as we discussed yesterday, was it? That they can't tell the difference between what they own and what they have custody or control of, in terms of this idea of moving the engineers from Tesla over to Twitter to fix things, which sounds like a thrifty convenience for Elon, but that's because Elon is, I guess, CEO and owns a major stake in both Tesla and Twitter now. But yeah, the rest of the owners of Tesla will be saying, no, you can't just move the people we're paying salaries to make cars over to your other company because you're in both companies. We're not, and we are we own a major chunk of Tesla, and you're using our money to pay these people, and we don't care about Twitter. You can't just do that. That's theft, not thrift. You see? Anyway, so all of this took place against the backdrop of a company that still has yet to hear anything official from Musk. As Monday began, after losing thousands of their colleagues days earlier, many employees didn't know who their managers are. It really should be were. But okay. Meanwhile, Musk's increasingly erratic leadership, coupled with his habit of tweeting in eye-watering bad taste, gave many current and former employees I spoke with a sinking feeling about the future of their company. Today, let's talk a little bit more about how the company botched its layoff process, what happened inside Twitter on Monday, and what that paywall might look like. I'm actually most interested in how the paywall would work, if it's something other than everybody has to pay. I'm just kind of curious about that. All right, let's see. The Blue disaster, that's section 3 down here. By the day's end, I'm told at least some teams had begun to hold meetings in which employees were informed who their managers are, what their organization charts look like, and what their priorities will be. But several employees I spoke with were still wrestling with one overarching question: do Musk and his team have any idea what they're doing? On the one hand, the company is telling advertisers that it's thriving. The Verge's Alex Heath reported, adding 15 million daily users since the end of the second quarter. But the rollout of Musk's first signature project, a new version of the Twitter Blue subscription that will allow anyone to get a verification badge, has been a disaster. The company rolled out a new version of the app on Saturday with release notes that said the new Blue was available. The copy, written by, I forget what the guy's first name is. Is it Jason or something like that? Calcanis, the friend of Musk's who has come on board to help out, apparently, was widely derided for sounding like a phishing email. That's funny. The problem is that Blue was not available. That is a big problem. And so those who did subscribe found that they had merely gotten access to the current version of Blue, whatever that actually was at the time that Musk acquired the place. Then, after a debate about the potential effects of unleashing thousands of new verified accounts onto the platform in the middle of the U.S. midterm elections, the company postponed the launch. So at least they had the good sense to do that. But the new Blue likely faces larger problems. The existing version only has a little more than 100,000 active subscribers. Platformer, whatever that is again, has learned. The new version will be 37.5% more expensive. I mean, it's zero now, so I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean. And its value seems murky for most regular users of the platform. It's unclear how the company will persuade enough people to subscribe to justify the effort. I don't actually know what it does. Twitter employees tried to sell Musk and Sachs on the idea of asking business accounts to pay for extra features, since many of them use Twitter to reach large audiences. But they were dismissed in favor of offering wide-scale verification first, I'm told. Other employees have warned about a secondary feature of the new Blue that Musk added at the last minute, reducing ad load in the Twitter app by half. Estimates showed that Twitter will lose about $6 in ad revenue per user in the United States by making that change, sources said. Factoring in Apple and Google's share of the $8 monthly subscription, Twitter would likely lose money on Blue if the ad light plan is enacted. The business fundamentals are just not there, said one former employee who worked on the plans. Musk has been heavily involved in the chaotic launch of Blue, participating in stand-up meetings and exchanging regular emails with Esther Crawford, a director of product management at the company. There is one decision maker, and that is me, Musk told workers, according to meeting notes shared with employees in Slack. That'll cheer everybody up. Any detail of Twitter Blue must be cleared with him down to the last detail, the message added. But all of that could be a prelude to the biggest change of all, charging most or all users a subscription fee to use Twitter. Both Musk and Sachs have discussed the idea in recent meetings, according to a person familiar with the matter. One such plan might allow everyone to use Twitter for a limited amount of time each month, but require a subscription to continue browsing, the person said. Maybe that would work. I don't know. It could not be learned how serious Musk and Sachs are about the paywall. Twitter did not respond to a request for comment. Nobody's allowed to respond except Elon, I'm sure. It also does not appear imminent, as the Blue team is wholly occupied with the launch of expanded verification. Still, given Twitter's huge debt burden, thanks to all the borrowing Elon did to buy the place, the backward economics of Blue, and the recent pause in spending by major advertisers, it's clear that Musk and his brain trust will have to do something to significantly increase revenue, and whatever they choose, it seems increasingly clear that Twitter will never be the same. So, sorry to report that as likely fact. I don't know whether they're ever going to get around to the paywall, but will they ruin the place? That's becoming increasingly likely. Okay, let's see. Oh, I think I already had that in pocket. Didn't need to mark that again. Other stories to share with you. This is an interesting one as well. How about we go over here? We'll make this a segue. Washington Post, Drew Harwell and Josh Dawsey have this interesting story. We got to inject some of the former guy into today just to remind everybody what they're out there voting about. Trump once reconsidered sticking with Truth Social. Now he's stuck. Yeah, I mean, I figured as much, but it's interesting to hear it just laid out there. The former president has told his allies that he can't leave his Twitter clone because he's propping it up, and he doesn't want a site so closely associated with his brand to collapse. That's about what I figured. So what's going on? The co-founders of former President Donald Trump's post-presidential startup, Trump Media and Technology Group, had a name for June 11th, 2021, Meltdown Day. I don't remember what happened then. Let's find out. Andy Litinsky and Wes Moss, former contestants on Trump's reality show The Apprentice. I remember those guys from an earlier article we read. They had a week earlier traveled with an 11-person entourage, to Trump's palatial golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey to show off what they'd worked for months to build. That was, of course, a web of conservative-aimed business ventures, including the Twitter clone Truth Social that heavily promoted and depended on Trump's name and brand. Trump, however, was already considering other ideas. On June 11th, Trump met at Bedminster with another suitor, his former aide, Jason Miller, who was launching a rival conservative network. Remember that one? Getter. And had offered Trump at least $5 million a year and a stake in the company to join. Did he walk away from that? A Trump defection would have triggered a disastrous meltdown of everything Litinsky and Moss had created. Trump media lawyers scrambled to mount a counterattack, or rather, I should say, Trump Media, the company, the putative company. Anyway, the lawyers scrambled to mount a counterattack, according to people familiar with the episode, which has not been previously reported. Would Trump really do a side deal? The Trump Media co-founders wrote in a daily log that company whistleblower Will Wilkerson shared with government investigators in the Washington Post. Trump ultimately stuck with Truth Social, helping the site attract a modest following, but the billionaire industrialist Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter could put Trump's commitment to a new test, and some in his orbit wonder whether he'll be able to stay loyal to a small site that is struggling to gain an audience and faces looming financial threats. I mean, I guess the chances of him sticking with it are increased by the now also increasing chances that Twitter will collapse under the weight of Musk's hubris, but we'll see. Trump has told his allies that he can't leave Truth Social because he's propping it up, and he doesn't want a site so closely associated with his brand to collapse, according to people familiar with his thinking, if that's what it is, who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal matters. A spokesman for Trump did not respond to a detailed request for comment on this story. Musk has called Twitter's ban of Trump after the U.S. Capitol riot on January 6th a mistake and pledged to reinstate Trump's account, although when that might occur remains unclear. Trump, however, has said he would not return even if he was invited back, saying he wanted to focus on his efforts at Truth Social. I mean, this is a perfect situation because, for Musk trying to take over Twitter, like that would be the biggest news. And, as much as it might destroy Twitter ultimately, that would just be the biggest attention grabber there could possibly be. And if he could use Trump's addiction to exposure to actually lure him away from his own branded project, that'd be perfect for him. Like Twitter crushes a potential rival, although I don't think they'll have a rival Twitter. But they might now, if they were never going to grow to the size necessary to rival Twitter, but you could crush Twitter to the size of Truth Social. I mean, if you really ruin the place. But I mean, just strategically, it would make a great deal of sense for Elon Musk to want to do something to distract Trump from developing his platform and instead boosting Twitter. So anyway, but you can see where Trump thinks he's stuck. If I choose to run, I will only use truth to post his thoughts, Trump told Fox News on the day after Musk's takeover of Twitter became official. When I put out a truth, it's all over the place. It really isn't, but that's what he has to tell himself. The platform feels, quote, like home, he said, and he likes the way it works, though he doesn't know what it is. In a Truth Social post, he added, I love truth, in all caps, and he really doesn't. But Trump's 4 million followers on the platform are a small fraction of the 88 million he once had on Twitter, and dozens of his posts called truths there in recent weeks have received none of the broad engagement and traction he counted on during his presidency. Trump has asserted in recent Truth Social posts and TV interviews that Truth Social has performed better than the biggest apps on the internet, including Twitter and TikTok. The app debuted at the top of the Google App Store rankings last month when Google added it, but it has plunged in the days since, and it remains outranked by mainstream social networks in every measure. In September, Truth Social had fewer than 1.7 million monthly unique visitors in the United States, according to the traffic analysis group SimilarWeb, lower than the websites for the crypto news source CoinDesk, the drugstore chain CVS Health, and the internal job listing page for Walmart. Wow. That month, Twitter had more than 184 million unique visitors in the United States, SimilarWeb estimates show. So 1.7 million versus 184 million. The allure of Twitter, a nerve center and obsession for many of those interested in American news and politics, could become even harder to ignore when Trump launches his widely expected campaign for the 2024 presidential race, which, by the way, he's rumored to be considering starting right away as soon as the close of voting today. I don't think that they're actually organized to do that. But, he wants to capitalize on what he thinks is going to be the momentum of today's election. The wrinkle in the story being that the RNC, the Republican National Committee, says that once he's a declared candidate, they can't pay his legal bills anymore, which is a little bit more formal adherence to the state of the law than I credited the Republican National Committee for being willing to show. And Trump will berate them for doing it and say that the law that says it's illegal is probably itself unconstitutional. Let's sue. Just give me all your money and I'll sue and I'll cover the costs. And then he won't. But we'll see whether that has any impact on things at the RNC. Where were we with this? So yes, right. Trump aides still print out tweets with positive feedback about him, as well as messages of influential reporters and lawmakers, and hand deliver them at his request, people familiar with the matter said. Litinsky and Moss did not respond to requests for comment. The Post sent Trump media a detailed list of claims for this story, none of which were disputed. Trump media spokeswoman Shannon Devine said only in a statement, "The Washington Post's obsessive series of conspiracy theories about Truth Social read like the jealous projections of a failing newspaper, because the Post is, in fact, a failing newspaper, envious of our undeniable popularity." Wow. They never get any better. When Trump had considered jumping to Getter, the co-founders at Trump Media felt confident he'd stick by their side. In February of 2021, shortly after his supporters stormed the Capitol, Trump signed a document with a mutual non-compete clause pledging not to work with anyone else in exchange for 90% of the company's shares. Wilkerson, the former Trump Media executive, told the Post. He was fired last month after that interview. In the services agreement document, which Wilkerson shared with the Post, the co-founders said Trump had been, quote, robbed of his digital voice and been, quote, viciously and brutally silenced by big tech. An injustice that could help rectify with their strategic plan to commercialize targeted media and technology opportunities using Trump's brand. The men pledged to devote whatever time is necessary to accomplish Trump's media or the Trump company's goals, including meeting with Trump whenever he wanted. That's the big plan. The document envisioned a pro-Trump umbrella organization, including technology startups and a publishing house. It even laid out guidelines for how company employees could be reimbursed for corporate expenses. For his part, Trump agreed to give the co-founders a perpetual, royalty-free, irrevocable right to use Trump's name, photo, and likeness in any format and medium they wanted, according to the agreement. Trump also offered up access to email databases compiled by Trump and his family company, the Trump Organization. In the following months, the co-founders raised money for the Trump business, recruited staffers for the company, and traveled repeatedly to Trump's homes in hope of keeping him happy and on board with their plans, according to Wilkerson and internal documents he shared with the Post. The co-founders did not realize until Meltdown Day, however, that Miller, Trump's longtime spokesman, had spoken with Trump repeatedly to lure him to Getter. During one meeting with Miller, Trump asked whether a platform with truth in the name sounded good. not mentioning that he was already attached to one. People familiar with the meeting said. Miller declined to comment for the story, so he's interestingly playing both sides here. When the co-founders learned of Trump's meeting, they immediately set about undermining Miller, that's fine with me, with details of his interpersonal squabbles. The conservative radio host Dan Bongino, is that how he pronounces that? Hates Jason Miller, the co-founders noted in a log entry on June 13th. This log is a really interesting item, by the way. They also scrambled to recommit Trump to his own company. In late June, Moss, Latinsky, and Wilkerson traveled to Trump Tower in New York to demonstrate a Truth Social prototype for Trump and his adult sons, Eric and Donald Jr. The men compiled a presentation showing off company milestones, including the raising of millions of dollars in private investment and the installation of key personnel for Trump's company, according to a copy of the document. To commemorate the moment, the co-founders gathered outside the building and took a group selfie, which Wilkerson provided to the Post. But all the while, Trump continued to negotiate with Miller about jumping to Getter. On July 1st, when Getter was officially launched, Bradford Cohen, another former Apprentice contestant who'd become a lawyer in South Florida and helped arrange the co-founders' first pitch with Trump, exploded on Miller, telling him he was engaging in tortious interference because the site had an account named Real Donald Trump using an uppercase I instead of the lowercase L. That's my trick. That they'd believed was a placeholder for Trump. One of these people said, a person involved with Getter told Politico that day that the site had an account reserved for Trump and waiting for him, but that's a decision for him to make. Miller's final offer to Trump included $100 million and potentially more over 5 years to post on Getter, the people said. The deal would even have included a payout for Trump if he were elected president again, one of these people said. Oh boy. And much of the money would have been paid near the end of the agreement before Trump retook office. So a big lump sum payment before he then has to, disclose his income again. Although maybe he just never does that again. Trump expressed interest in such a deal, but never committed, and he repeatedly requested larger equity in the company. People briefed on the meeting said that's pretty amazing. At one point, Trump asked if he could get 85 or 90% before settling on a lower number after Miller likened the agreement more to a trademark or licensing deal, the people said. Even as the Getter deal loomed, the Trump media co-founders faced troubles on another front from Trump's family members and business associates who were livid over the original services agreement and argued that Trump had given away too much, Wilkerson said, in exchange for 90% of the company. In one email exchange Wilkerson provided to the Post, lawyers for Trump's older business and his new startup grappled over new license agreements proposed by Trump's family representatives that would have greatly diminished the company's standing and made Trump's involvement non-exclusive. The elimination of DJT's exclusive commitment to Trump Media Group's product offering essentially renders the TMG, Trump Media Group initiative, unbankable, a lawyer for the co-founders wrote in an early August email. The new agreement essentially guts the key commercial commitments by DJT to TMG's product offering. Trump Media ultimately agreed to the new agreement, which restricted how the company could use Trump's name and brand and offered more carve-outs for Trump political activities and business ventures that only he could profit from or control, according to a copy of the document Wilkerson shared with the Post. In the agreement, Trump agreed to make his posts exclusively available on Truth Social for 8 hours before he could share them elsewhere. The agreement offered exceptions for political messaging, political fundraising, or get-out-the-vote efforts, which he could do anywhere at any time. In the months since, Truth Social has secured a niche online for Trump boosters and right-wing memes. The site is rife with criticism of Trump's enemies and is commonly used by people who say they believe lies that rampant election theft was the reason for Trump's 2020 loss. A pro-Trump group in Arizona, which has used Truth Social to make false claims about voting fraud and organize teams of ballot box watchers, was ordered by a federal judge last week to post notices on the site accurately describing local voter laws. After a delayed start on his own platform, Trump has begun using it actively, posting memes and sharing messages from accounts promoting QAnon, the jumbled set of conspiracy theories that herald him as the ultimate warrior against a deep state cabal of satanic elites. You know about that. All right. Well, let's see. That's, I think, probably the end of the usable portion of this article. I mean, I think although there is some interesting financial information down at the bottom here. So maybe we'll consider continuing on here, and we're almost done here. Getter is doing no better, by the way. Its audience of 400,000 unique monthly visitors in September, according to similar web estimates, was a quarter of Truth Social's size. Truth Social's financial standing also remains in doubt. Trump Media committed last year to merge with Special Purpose Acquisition Company, or SPAC, named Digital World Acquisition, to which investors have given roughly $300 million in operating funds. But Trump Media cannot unlock that money without a merger that has been frozen by ongoing federal investigations. The announcement of a shareholder vote to extend the company's merger deadline has been postponed 6 times in the past 2 months, most recently on Thursday, as indication that the SPAC still does not have the votes it needs to seal the deal. Liquidation of the SPAC is scheduled for December 8th. If the extension still has not been passed, zeroing out Trump Media's biggest financial base. How do you like that? Digital World's sponsor paid $2.8 million in September to give itself 3 months to pass the vote. But as the vote effort has doddered on, the company has lost money from investors leery of the ongoing legal morass, the possibility of Trump's return to Twitter, and Truth Social's questionable performance. Investors have pulled at least $138 million out of what was once a $1 billion deal, Digital World said in filings to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Digital World also recently changed its address, in case that's of interest to you, from an office in Miami's financial district to a box in a UPS store, security filings show. Its share prices plunged from around $100 earlier this year to $17.48 on Friday. Trump Media's co-founders were ousted earlier this year after Trump signed a surprise document shaking up the company, knocking Litinsky off the board of directors and adding his son, Donald Jr., and the company's chief executive, former Representative Devin Nunes. Other executives left shortly thereafter. Trump has continued to be open to other corners of the right-wing ecosystem, after Kanye West, I guess, jumped into this fray as well. We got to take our break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. By the way, let's see, I'll just finish up what we were reading a second ago. There's like one more sentence left. But yes, Trump has continued to be open to other corners of the right-wing online ecosystem. Kanye West, apparently, announced last month that he'd be buying Parler, the other right-wing social network that isn't doing anything. And Trump and Kanye reportedly had a discussion about joining each other's platforms, to no avail, I'm sure. And that wraps up the financial news about Trump's latest attempt at making a business succeed and finding out that he really knows nothing. And it's all been smoke and mirrors and dumb luck and other people's incompetence that have allowed him to get away with everything he's done in life so far. Okay, so let's see. I have also had pointed out to me via Twitter, which still exists, by Don Hammond, who you can find as Blue State Don on Twitter, that there is an ongoing series of posts at Daily Kos that compile stories very similar to the ones that I've been kind of sort of compiling in Twitter under the Republican Squad label. And this one, I guess, has numbers far exceeding what we've put together. This is, I'm directed to what I guess is probably the latest installment from October 15th of this year of Republican Sexual Predators, Abusers, and Enablers, Part 36. Yes, you heard that right, Part 36. Prepared and posted by Kajsa Lilyhook. Hopefully I've pronounced the first name. Well, I hope I pronounced the whole thing correctly, but I have no idea. But I've not run into this yet. I'm a little less active in reading there than on Twitter. You know, I kind of made that switch a while ago, but understandable. Anyway, glad to know about this. Part 36 of this series begins just an introductory paragraph here that I imagine goes in every one of them. This is the 36th installment in the list of Republican sexual predators, abusers, and enablers who contribute to rape culture. These are people who abused their power or defended the abuse of power. These are not folks caught in consensual scandals such as being gay, which is not a scandal, but I get where you're coming from, having an affair, or soliciting adult sex workers, unless they are trafficked against their will. They may be hypocrites, but they are not predators. There is one guy on the list for having sex with a sex worker, but only because he paid with a check and then stopped payment. I mean, okay. But anyway, the real point here is that this is the 36th installment, and it begins with entry number 876. So this is entries 876 through, let me scroll down here, 900. And so I guess they're doing 25 or so at a time. So it's very much like the Gun Fail series, except it's just, nearing 1,000 entries of sexual abusers, predators, and enablers who happen to be members of the Republican Party or closely associated with it. So I just want to let you know that that's out there. I'll provide you with the link. You can peruse it at your leisure, if that's the way you use your leisure time, and keep tabs on those things. And I guess maybe they'll let us know when they reach 1,000, and we'll, I don't know what, have some fireworks, something like that. Remains to be seen. All right, let's see other stories in our second to last segment. What else did I want to share with you? This I thought was a interesting development as well. Just, I guess, a sideline story to everything else that's going on. But the New York Times, I guess, beginning to do their, I don't know whether it'll really be due or not, but some diligence on other pretenders to the 2024 Republican nomination, beginning here with Ron DeSantis and uncovering, I guess, a little-known chapter in his life. Pranks, parties, and politics. Ron DeSantis' year as a school teacher. Well, most people, a lot of people spend a year or so as a school teacher, and it's otherwise an admirable pursuit, but very rarely will it be headlined, that story. Pranks, parties, and politics. But okay, as at a private school 20 years ago, the future Florida governor was a popular history teacher and coach, but some students were taken aback by his comments about the Civil War, interesting, and abortion. Probably not usually a topic for discussion as a teacher and coach. Actually probably the kind of grooming that he would likely outlaw in Florida now. But, for him to do it, of course, is awesome. For everybody else to do it, or more accurately, not do it, but allow us to accuse them of doing it, that's just fine. Francis Robles, reporting from Rome, Georgia, for this piece. 20 years ago, in the foothills of Northwest Georgia, a new history teacher joined the faculty of one of the state's oldest and largest boarding schools. He was a brash young Ivy League graduate, an athlete, who made it clear to anyone who was listening that his sojourn at Darlington School was a pit stop on his way to bigger things. Maybe he would even be president someday, he told his students. Sounds kind of weird. Amid the revolving door of recent college graduates who taught at one time or another at the independent private school, the teacher, just 23 at the time, was the talk of the 20-year class reunion last month at Darlington. For one important reason, he is now governor of Florida. The episodes that former students describe about Governor Ron DeSantis' year at Darlington, the vast ongoing commitment to education, 1 year at a private school, they offer a window into the formative years of one of the most polarizing figures in American politics, a rising Republican politician who's expected to easily win re-election next week. That would be today that he's expecting this. We hope it doesn't happen. And then possibly set his sights on the White House. As a baseball and football coach at the school, Mr. DeSantis was admired and respected by his team. As a teacher, he was remembered by some former students as cocky and arrogant. Oh, I think you got the right guy. He once publicly embarrassed a student with a prank, hung out at parties with seniors, and got into debates about the Civil War with students who questioned the focus and sometimes the accuracy of his lessons. The governor, who has taken on the, quote, woke left over the teaching of history, gender identity, and sexual orientation, showed signs back then of being a committed conservative, a young, cool teacher whom girls liked and boys envied. He was a total jock. That was his personality, said Gates Minnis, a 2003 graduate who lives in Colorado. He was definitely proud that he graduated Ivy and thought that he was very special. But Mr. DeSantis was popular among many students. He was definitely one of the cooler guys, said Trip Barnes. If you get some question about, if you wonder about who's attending the school, I think the names are telling you. A student whose mother taught at the school. There were other young teachers who tried to be everybody's friend who didn't have nearly his mystique. He was, quote, charismatic and, quote, very smart, Mr. Barnes said. People liked him. Mr. DeSantis' office did not respond to requests to discuss his year at Darlington or his students' recollections. The governor does not include his year as a high school teacher in many of his official biographies and does not appear to have spoken publicly at length about his time at the school, which is weird because that's the sort of thing that politicians will frequently hold up. I was a teacher for some time. Now, if it's a public school teacher, they get to hold that up. Even if there are people who attack public schools, then they say, that's where I learned how bad public schools were. It's interesting that he doesn't mention his time as a teacher because it's usually a selling point. I don't know if this article makes any such allegation, but I wonder, the insinuation appears to be, maybe if he opens the door to that by saying I was a teacher and using that as a selling point, some stories may emerge about what he was really like as a teacher that he'd prefer not. It's just not worth the candle. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's see. So he doesn't usually, and he doesn't appear to have spoken publicly at length about his time at the school either. DeSantis taught at Darlington in the 2001-2002 school year after graduating from Yale University and just before attending Harvard Law School. The co-ed independent boarding and day school in Rome, Georgia, founded in 1905, was among the first private schools in the South to admit black students, so he doesn't even have to be afraid of that necessarily. According to its website, several students of color who spoke with the Times said they had been recruited with generous scholarships. Boarding students live in one of 6 dormitories on a lush 500-acre campus northwest of Atlanta in an area now represented in Congress by conservative firebrand Representative Marjorie, or Murdery, Trader Green, as we call her. Students visit the non-denominational chapel once a week, tossing their backpacks on the lawn in a manner that suggests no one is worried about theft. That's nice. Tuition, room, and board for resident students now tops $50,000 a year. Yikes. With about 750 students from kindergarten to 12th grade, the school's students are not just from well-to-do local families, but also from liberal enclaves like New York and California. Not to say that the parents of those children are actually liberals. They're just from liberal enclaves. In Mr. DeSantis' history and government courses, that made for spirited debates. Maybe they are. Liberals, after all. Danielle Pompey, I don't know how she pronounces Pompey, remembers Mr. DeSantis, a Florida native and recent Yale grad, being an outsider like her, a New Yorker with a thick accent to match. But Ms. Pompey, who is black and was on an academic scholarship, said she felt that Mr. DeSantis treated her worse because of her race. Mr. DeSantis, that's interesting, was mean to me. Do they call him Mr. Ron? Was mean to me and hostile toward me, said Ms. Pompey, who graduated in 2003. Not aggressively, but passively, because I was black. She recalled Mr. DeSantis teaching Civil War history in a way that sounded to her like an attempt to justify slavery. Like in history class, he was trying to play devil's advocate that the South had good reason to fight that war, to kill other people, over owning people, black people, she said. He was trying to say it's not okay to own people, but they had property and businesses. Ms. Pompey said that she saw parallels between Mr. DeSantis' views as a young educator and his policies as governor 20 years later. He had a good opportunity to enrich people, to come there from the Northeast and show people in the South that we can blend, he said. It seemed like he didn't want to do that. Now, he was a Florida native, of course, but he had just been at school at Yale, so I guess that was supposed to be the Northeast bit. Ms. Minnis, M-I-N-I-S, I remember we mentioned that name earlier, was one of the other students who was white and was in the same history class as Ms. Pompey, also remembers debating issues around the Civil War. Mr. DeSantis wasn't so much politically opinionated, she said, but, in her view, factually wrong. She remembers him claiming that every city in the South had burned, even though she knew that her hometown, Savannah, had not, and she called him out on it, and I mean famously so. And they're in Georgia. I mean, it's not hard to come by this history. He just doesn't know it. Another student who requested anonymity because he feared repercussions for his job said Mr. DeSantis' takes on the Civil War were the subject of so much talk that students made a satirical video about him at the time for the video yearbook. Oh, I'd love to see that. The video, which was reviewed by the Times, includes a short snippet in which a voice purporting to be Mr. DeSantis is heard saying, "The Civil War was not about slavery. It was about two competing economic systems. One was in the North," and then I guess trails off, while a student dozes in his class. A student voiced the role of Mr. DeSantis because students did not have any actual footage of him, according to a student who helped put it together. Abortion was another issue that came up in class at least once, as in it's a history class, but okay. According to Matthew Arn, a former student, Mr. Arn, who was a senior, said students talked among themselves about Mr. DeSantis expressing his strict belief that abortion was wrong. He said it troubled him when his girlfriend, who was in Mr. DeSantis' history class, told him about what Mr. DeSantis had said. He had grown up in California, he said, and he disagreed with Mr. DeSantis' stance. That's an interesting way of coming to the conclusion that you disagree. Well, I grew up in California. Well, all right, but, do you have a different belief? Yes? Just say so. He's pretty much held fast to what he believes in, Mr. Arn said. Ms. Minnis added that he always seemed to have his eye on the future. He seems like someone who, as a young person, was in it for the long game, she said. Several students described Mr. DeSantis as having an air of superiority. Mr. DeSantis was kind of a smug guy, Mr. Arn said. Students were well aware that he had just graduated from Yale, he said. It was like I'm kind of better than you, he said, and we were all just kids. So, I guess that's where his resentment of northeastern liberal elites began to take shape. I mean, I guess it took shape, interestingly enough, while he was a northeastern elitist educational institution at Yale, and he probably felt that he was out of sorts and out of place there, but that he could, and while he wasn't able to, as a Florida native, lord it over I guess, the scions of northeastern liberal elitist families, he could, in Rome, Georgia, get away with that, I guess. So I guess that's where he went to go do it. Several students, he described them as having the air of superiority. He was a smug guy. I'm better than you. Several students recalled that Mr. DeSantis was a frequent presence at parties with the seniors who lived in town. And then he was all upset about grooming later on, it turns out. Most spoke about socializing with him on the condition of anonymity because they feared backlash for speaking publicly about it. As an 18-year-old, I remember thinking, "What are you doing here, dude?" One former student said, and that's usually a sign that he's going to be suspected of grooming at some point. Ms. Minnis said that when she was a senior, the fall after Mr. DeSantis left, she found a memo on a teacher's desk reminding the staff that fraternizing with students was inappropriate, even after they graduated. "That's got to be about Mr. DeSantis. That's what I remember everyone saying," she said. Other students remembered at least one other teacher who had socialized with students that year, so it could be about someone else. Last year, Hill Reporter, a blog put out by Democratic Super PAC, published a photograph of Mr. DeSantis taken with several female students from Darlington in 2002, one of whom was holding what appeared to be a bottle of beer. Two former students, both women, remember him attending at least two parties where alcohol was served, but they said that the parties took place after graduation and that they were not bothered by his presence at the time, although they question it now. It was his first job out of Yale. He was cute. We didn't really think too much about it, one of the former students said. 2 other students remember a prank involving Mr. DeSantis and a student who had bragged about how much milk he could drink. What a brag. Okay. They said Mr. DeSantis challenged the boy to guzzle as much milk as he could in one sitting. The boy did, and threw up as dozens of students watched. I think about it now. I'm a teacher in public school, said Adam Moody, who was a freshman on the baseball team and witnessed the incident. I put myself in that moment, and it's just unthinkable. There's a cruelty to the sense of humor. There's a cruelty to the mentorship. A spokeswoman for Darlington declined to comment in detail about DeSantis' time there. The spokeswoman, Tanika, I'm not sure how she pronounces this, Tanika King, said in an email that Mr. DeSantis taught 5 classes, coached 2 sports, and did dorm duty, supervising students outside of class hours in the residence halls. Ken Wempe, who was teaching at the middle school when Mr. DeSantis taught history, said that lineup was known as the triple threat, meaning that many boarding school teachers had larger workloads than at traditional day schools. You teach, you coach, and you work in the dormitory, said Mr. Wempe, who is now a middle school principal in Indianapolis. He said he earned about $27,000 a year at the time, with free housing and food in the dining halls. I'm sure he took triple duty, to just earn as much as possible. Like other first-year teachers, Mr. Wempe said, Mr. DeSantis was drinking from a fire hose and learning the job on the fly. My impressions of him were all positive, he said. Lee Grady, who graduated in 2004 and was on the baseball team that DeSantis coached, also recalled him fondly. He kept to himself, but when you connected with him, he opened up and he had a lot to give, Mr. Grady said. He helped a lot of us out there on the field, especially when some of us were distracted by being young adults. As a teacher, Mr. DeSantis was able to hone our minds to at least show that with hard work comes results, he said. I know a few of us were not the greatest. With his guidance, we became good baseball players and better people. So that's nice. Anyway, I wonder whether anything will emerge from that. Just going to put that on the radar. Nothing scandalous outright there, but certainly all the makings of a bigger story, maybe. And now it'll be on your radar so that if anything ever develops of it, you can say, hey, I heard about that way back when on Kagro in the Morning. All right, let's see. Other things to mention to you as we approach our third break and our final segment, and see if Joan's available to chat just one more time before the voting ends. But in the meantime, this story from Vice I thought was interesting. Just one of the many things that we'll be hearing stories about, I'm sure, as the abuses emerge from Election Day activities. This piece, entitled "A GOP official is allegedly knocking on doors to tell people they can't vote," the opposite of get out the vote. So the Republicans are out there trying to keep in the vote with door knocking, which is unusual. How is it working? Vice News has uncovered multiple reports of voter intimidation across Texas in the lead up to the midterm elections. David Gilbert reports. Basics of this story. Voters in Texas are facing an onslaught of voter intimidation tactics, obviously, I think, leading up to the midterm elections. It says this week, that's now today. And at least one case, the intimidation is allegedly being carried out by a prominent member of the local Republican Party. Last week, a woman in Austin reported an incident of voter intimidation at her home, allegedly carried out by a member of the Travis County Republican Party, to the Texas Civil Rights Project. That's where the reporting was made. We report this person to the Texas Civil Rights Project. We received a very alarming report over the past week about a precinct chair of the Travis County Republican Party knocking on people's doors, accusing them of illegally voting by mail, even though the people we spoke with were clearly eligible to vote by mail. Christina Beeler, a voting rights staff attorney with the civil rights group, told Vice News they were being extremely aggressive. The voter in Austin said that the person at the door identified herself as a precinct chair, and the voter was later able to identify the person as precinct chair for the Travis County Republican Party. The woman was accompanied by an unidentified man and accused the voter of illegally voting by mail. Beeler said the campaign appeared to be targeting people who had been voting by mail because the list of people who vote by mail is available publicly. The hostile and confrontational nature of voter intimidation tactics in Texas has increased significantly in recent weeks throughout the state. In addition to aggressive door-knocking campaigns, Vice News has also uncovered reports of elections officials demanding that voters hand over their smartphones and smartwatches before voting, and found that some poll workers were looking over voters' shoulders and wearing obviously partisan attire while inside the polling stations. Threatening letter-writing campaigns to voters have occurred as well. As concerns about voter intimidation heat up nationwide and armed groups threaten voting locations, Vice News also spoke with voter rights groups about threats ahead of this week's midterms, in fact, today's midterms. So then some discussion about the escalation in these voter intimidation tactics. I just wanted to make you aware of this particular angle on them. Very weird ones. The idea of demanding people's cell phones be handed over before they vote. Now, there are rules in most places against using your smartphones or cell phones while you're inside the polling place. You're not supposed to do that, but there's no rule that says they can or should enforce that by asking people to give up their devices before entering. I assume they're giving them back when they exit. Nobody is saying they just stole them from me outright, but that's not the way that rule is enforced. The basic thing is, well, that's the rule. You can announce it. You can post it. You can remind people, but there's nothing about confiscation or, preemptive removal of people's devices. So I don't know where that came from. And then I thought that was kind of maybe, is that even effective, knocking on people's doors and accusing them of voting illegally by mail? If the votes have been sent, I mean, it's not like they're then going to, maybe that's the aim. I guess they could then inform them. And I think in scanning this article, found out, well, it is possible for you to contact the elections board and rescind your ballot before it's counted. And maybe the hope was that they would scare people into doing that. But that requires, actively picking up the phone and A, believing them about it being illegal and B, actually doing something about it. That doesn't sound all that particularly easy to actually get done. So I don't know how effective it is, but maybe it's aimed at other members of the family and intimidating them from voting from, in person or something. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to do. But as you might have guessed, this particular voter that made this report was a black person, and there were white voters who were, this is about the removal of the cell phones, that the person who complained about that was black, and there were white voters who were walking in and not being asked to remove their cell phones or their watches. So at any rate, the group interceded in the incident, and the election worker in question was, quote, reprimanded. So at least there's that happening too. So anyway, those are the two new weird angles that are going on that I thought it might pay to be aware of as well. You might hear reports about that happening today in various locations. Let's see. And then one last bit that I thought I would try and squeeze in before our final segment. It always pays to make room for Gizmodo, I find. I don't really find that, but it sounds good. Homeland Security admits it tried to manufacture fake terrorists for Trump. Not that it was a group that they were going to call terrorists for Trump or even fake terrorists for Trump. That would have been an extraordinarily bad idea. Get the details here. Del Cameron reporting for Gizmodo. A new Homeland Security report details orders to connect protesters arrested in Portland to one another in service of the Trump imaginary Antifa plot. That's basically what's going on here. The Department of Homeland Security launched a failed operation that ensnared hundreds, if not thousands, of U.S. protesters in what new documents show was a sweeping, power-hungry effort before the 2020 election to bolster President Donald Trump's spurious claims about a, quote, terrorist organization he accused his Democratic rivals of supporting. An internal investigative report made public this month by Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon, details his findings of DHS lawyers concerning a previously undisclosed effort by Trump's acting, that's right, where is it, acting? Acting! Yes, Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf to amass secret dossiers on Americans in Portland attending anti-racism protests in the summer of 2020, sparked by the police murder of Minneapolis father George Floyd. The report describes attempts by top officials to link protesters to an imaginary terrorist plot in an apparent effort to boost Trump's re-election odds. What do you know? Raising concerns now about the ability of a sitting president to co-opt billions of dollars worth of domestic intelligence gathering efforts and intelligence assets for their own political gain. DHS analysts recounted orders to generate evidence of financial ties between protesters in custody, an effort that, had they not failed, would have seemingly served to legitimize President Trump's false claims about Antifa, an organization that not even his most loyal intelligence officers failed to drum up proof ever existed. What do you know? How interesting. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us, and as you know, there's no news today, nothing in particular happening. Nobody's busy, so that's good. Well, for you, of course, everything is happening at night. So as the returns come in, and it turns out you were just reading/writing about exactly what we were talking about. What serendipitous luck that is.
Well, It's
true.
Probably not giving away too much to say that behind the scenes, Daily Kos is prepping all of the big stories for tonight.
Yes, you're expecting
because
to do
it's
that.
a lot easier to just push them out when it has happened. And right now, I'm doing the Oregon governor's race.
Okay, so one of the big races on the radar for today, and right, like you said, it's no secret to say you're
first
prepping.
time in 40 years it could go to a Republican, in part because of what happened during that horrible summer of 2020 with the DHS.
Yes, and as we know, Oregon was totally destroyed and obliterated from the map, according to Republicans. Every city and province and home and farmland burned to the ground and destroyed by a massive attack led by the United Forces of Antifa, who totally have a capital and everything. Right.
It was ridiculous, but at the same time, it was really draining for everybody in the state of Oregon. It was awful. It riled people up. It discouraged people.
That is,
it depressed people.
I see. The things that were actually happening.
Against Democratic Governor Kate Brown,
Okay,
in large part. It just sort of fed into problems Portland has had with homelessness, with increasing violence. A lot of it, brought on by what happened that summer, but it's been really hard for the city to recover, and it's hard for the state to recover, and it's opened up a path to Christine Drazan, the QAnon-friendly, white supremacist-friendly Republican, former Republican leader of the House, in the House. Sorry.
Okay.
Against Tina Kotek, who was former Democratic leader, House Speaker.
Well, all right.
In Oregon. We had I should say, third candidate, Betsy Johnson, a multi-millionaire who inherited a timber fortune, who has been a Democrat in the Senate, in the Oregon Senate, and ran as an independent crank, basically, hating on everybody. With a lot of help from Nike former CEO and founder Phil Knight.
Okay.
Who apparently just, he didn't want Tina Kotek to win. He said so.
I see.
Previously. He also gave money to Christine Drazen. Both Betsy Johnson and Christine Drazen are friendly with a group called Timber Unity, endorsed by Timber Unity. Drazen officially, Johnson sort of, well, yeah, we'd be happy if she won. It's a group that's led some of the protests and threatening threatening movements at the state capitol, trying to break into the Capitol, breaking into the Capitol. They've got 3%ers, they've got Proud Boys. Many of them were at the January 6th insurrection. So we've got two candidates pretty happy with the white supremacists and the extremists. And we've got Tina Kotek, who could lose in part because of what Donald Trump did to Portland in 2020.
Okay. That explains the background and where it fits in. And I mean, aside from all of the exaggeration, as you're pointing out, aside from all the exaggeration from Republicans, there were in fact major disruptions going on, at least in Portland. No, the whole state didn't burn to the ground. No, all of Portland didn't burn to the ground. But problems, yes. Things that people would blame a Democrat for, no matter whether they had anything to do with it or not, yes. And that's what they're facing. Okay. Got it. And, so now this story reveals that, look, there are problems and then there are fake invented problems. And how interesting that we now find that the Department of Homeland Security was tasked with the job of creating the narrative that would, they were aiming at keeping Donald Trump in office as president, but failing that, we could perhaps elect a Republican governor of Oregon instead. Maybe we'll try that.
Yeah. Well, that certainly wasn't what Trump had in mind, although he's endorsed Drazen.
No one other than himself, of course.
It's it's depressing to think I moved from Idaho because
I'm sorry. Yeah. It's not you.
I think Portland will see this. I think a lot of Oregon Republicans who used to be really reasonable, pretty much moderate Democrats back in the day, could see what's happening, step up and do the right thing. I'm hoping.
Okay. Yeah.
I think, looking at the polling, probably this is a historical thing. Portlanders are underpolled in polling leading up to races. So I think Kotek will probably be okay. I hope. But yeah, that's certainly one of the things I'll be watching closely tonight.
Right. Well, you don't want to find out that, you've walked into another trap, but it's still not, even so, it's just not the same. But, you'd like to have the idea that you've moved to a bright future.
Yes.
Would be nice.
Yes. And just my faith in Oregon, because, they've always been reasonable people here.
Yes.
This has been a good state. Okay, it was founded by white supremacists, and one of the things we voted on was making slavery illegal in our state constitution, because it's, that hasn't happened yet in Oregon. So
okay.
Hopefully that also happens in 2022.
Yeah, that'd be nice to get around to that detail.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Wow. Okay. So there's plenty to work on, even there in Oregon.
I have to say it's kind of scary writing up these things. I'm writing the Democrat wins, I'm writing the Republican wins, and it's not making me feel better about
Yeah. Well.
anything. Having it's sort of whiplash in getting ready for tonight.
Right,
confusing.
but that's the reality of dealing with a flood of important breaking news all at once tonight. Right, you got to be prepared for either one, and if you wait for the results before you actually do the writing, then then it's not breaking news by the time it gets written and published.
Behind.
Yeah.
So this is what Hunter and Laura and I have been spending the last several days doing, is getting prepared, because we're covering lots and lots of races. Just, the generic House, generic Senate, which way it goes, all of the key governor's races, all of the key Senate races.
Right.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and then of course, there's the crazy scenario that I keep bringing up. Like, will we know what the Congress will look like?
We very likely won't know,
Okay.
and that's the other thing that's sort of keeping my eye twitching. For real, my left eye is just going nuts.
Oh no!
It's going to be pretty scary.
Yeah.
Over the next several days, because that the Trumpsters are going to make the most out of these delays. They're going to call fraud. They're already calling fraud.
Right.
If they say preemptively, if there are delays, we're going to say it's because you're cheating.
Right. They are clear about that, and then they are also, of course, doing things to cause delays so that they'll be able to do that. Yeah.
So it definitely happens, and then they're inviting violence.
Terrific. A lot of the threats of violence are also preemptive as well. In some places, what they've found is their favorite tactic appears to be threatening violence against the temporary elections workers that have been hired to help process ballots in a timely fashion, and they have scared them by leveling death threats against them, and they are quitting in droves. And in some places, the elections officials are unsure of how quickly they'll be able to process ballots in the absence of all these people who are quitting because they're afraid of the death threats. But then they'll just simply point to those delays and say, see, that's the fraud we were telling you about. That's why we wanted to kill them in the first place, and we were right. Great.
Yeah.
That's not going to be any fun either.
And we see it coming. We know it's going to happen. And, maybe it won't happen. Maybe blood will not be shed in the coming week.
Hey, you can hope for it. And, we've sort of been through this. We saw it coming in 2020. People saw it coming in 2016, too. So now this is like a couple of years of getting used to and spreading the story of, all right, what Republican operations are like on and around Election Day are creating these kinds of delays and then pointing to delays and saying that's fraud, and so therefore we're right and the elections have been stolen. Not everybody realizes it, but more people realize it each time. Maybe we learn something, maybe we become immune to it. I don't know. Maybe not yet, but eventually.
I don't think the traditional media is ready for it yet necessarily.
I guess not.
I think they're still thinking this is unthinkable, even after January 6th.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, unfortunately.
And I think, a lot of them walked into it. One of the things that's been driving me nuts with the polling in particular is all of the obviously junk Republican polls that people like Nate Cohn and Nate Silver, the Nates, have absorbed into their polling averages.
Yeah.
Ones that show that Republicans are doing better than they likely are. We're not sure, but it's really sort of poisoned the well on polling. But it's, I think, part of the plan on part of Republicans, because we know that they're capable of planning this way, to have another thing to point to, another bunch of evidence, quote
Yeah.
unquote,
Right.
to say, look, they're stealing this. How could the polls have been so wrong?
Right. And even though, again, we've now, how many years in a row have we been saying, I don't understand it, the polls were so wrong. And, so now their claim is based on that thing, which we've been used to for a long time. But, in the moment, that's what they want to point to. All the polls said that there was a big trend toward Republicans. Now it turns out that Republicans either have lost or haven't won as much as we thought we were going to. So therefore, it must be fraud. Plus, also look at these delays. And we're going to do a January 6th again, except this time it'll be January 3rd, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that worries me a great deal, and I still haven't quite figured out, there's no real precedent on what to do if enormous numbers of races are, even if they've concluded and the state officials have declared a winner, if they're contested by the Republican candidates who lost anyway. I'm not certain what happens if partisan control of the House of Representatives is still up in the air come January 3rd, but a larger number of one party's representatives are not having their credentials challenged, and so they present at least a temporary working majority, but the number of races being challenged could change that balance. I don't know how you organize the House exactly.
Yeah.
So, things are going to be pretty close anyway. And if Republicans, whether they take control or not, there may be a handful, literally a handful of seats separating majority from minority in the House. And in
the Senate.
That's true, too. Yeah. And that's, I guess, more routinely the case just because you have a lower number of members. But still, this could happen in both houses, and we remind you that ultimately it is the members of those houses that will decide how to settle those election contests, and there are rarely more than one or two at a time, but with record numbers, hundreds of Republicans, even incumbent Republicans now running for re-election on platforms of election denialism. How many of them would either A, be willing to challenge the results of their election if they lost, or B, just be willing to blindly vote for the Republican in such a contest? And if there are 200 Republicans who win but aren't challenged, and 199 Democrats who win and aren't challenged, with 35 outstanding races, what if it looks like state officials say those 35 should be Democrats, but there's one more Republican in the House that hasn't had his credentials challenged than Democrats, and they have a majority vote. And 200 to 199, Republicans are declared the winner of 35 House contests in a row. And they just seize the place. I don't know.
I don't know either.
So, write that.
Yeah.
Be ready for that tonight. Well, you have until January 3rd to get ready for that one. And of course, it may be just the most far-fetched political fiction, or political science fiction, I guess, that you ever see. And there'll be at most 2 contests that make it to the House floor, and it has nothing to do with anything. But they rioted in 2021 and tried to overturn the results of the biggest election we have. And they're not really sure whether everybody who was involved in planning it should really be charged with the crime. Why don't we wait until see how the next couple elections come out before we actually decide what to do with these people?
You're not making me feel any better.
I'm not. How's your eye? How's the other eye? This would be like what would happen if you went to get your eye fixed by Rand Paul.
Yes,
So,
who was also up for re-election.
That's true.
Cycle.
By the way, I'm certified by the American Society of People Who Think They're Eye Doctors. So, I'm as good as anybody. So, all right. Well, don't worry about that yet. We have a while to do it. You don't need to focus on that.
We have a while to worry about that. We'll see how things shape up.
Yes.
And, we can also plot what we're going to do after the election.
Mm-hmm.
and how we can do things to make the terrorists the economic terrorists
Oh,
in the
yes.
House Republican caucus
Right.
stand
If everything...
down. Like, let's take care of the debt ceiling before January 3rd.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, particularly if, there's some... Even if everything goes normally and... Well, really, honestly, even if everything goes normally and Democrats look like they're going to hold on to both houses of Congress, you should still be doing that.
You should
quite
still
honestly.
be doing this. This should be, get a lot of judges done, but also just take the debt ceiling away as an issue for the foreseeable future, for at least the next 2 years. At least.
That would be a good idea. And even if they expected to be in control of the House, again, my stupid scenario is, everybody in normal world agrees that there should be more Democrats in the House than Republicans, according to the results of the quote unquote election that we're having. But we say different. And we're going to show up and insist that we should be in control. There should be more of us. And is there another mob coming? I don't know. Who are they going to hang? I don't know. You think you won, so you figured you could wait until next Congress to take care of the debt ceiling. Why don't you take care of it while there's no dispute about who's supposed to be in Congress and you have control?
We should caveat this in saying it's just not necessarily that easy because there's Joe Manchin.
Oh, yes, that's true, too.
Who has already said, well, okay, I'll negotiate with the Republicans. Let's do that.
Oh.
So it's not going to be so easy for Schumer to deal with the debt ceiling because Joe Manchin.
Yeah, all right. That's a good point, and very little chance that you would, convince him of the danger by outlining, well, what if they come here and contest all the elections? Oh, well, they won't because they never have. I never heard of that. Are you sure you can do that? All right.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, yeah, that's an issue. So I think in all likelihood, you're probably right. They end up delaying, though that's not the wise move. And it would be great if somebody could convince Joe Manchin of that. But he's like professionally invested in not being convinced.
Yeah. I don't like this timeline, Kagro.
No, I don't either. I'm going to start over. Call back in 10 minutes. We're going to do this segment over again. I don't know. All right. Well, this makes for an interesting next Tuesday segment. We'll have some clue about what the field looks like and what the likelihood of, really stupid, truly dumb things happening or just routinely dumb things happening. We'll get a better fix on that.
I really hope it's routine. Let's go for routine.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows how to handle those.
Yeah.
I think.
Of course, now, government shutdowns and debt ceiling hostage taking is routine.
Right.
Thank you very much, Mitch McConnell. So,
yeah. All right. Well, now back to just the left eye for you anyway. So it's a disaster. This is the regular disaster, the one you've written about before.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
all right. Yeah, good. Well, right. So, I mean, at least you don't have to stay late at the office. You can go home and have your eye twitch. I guess. All right. Well,
so
that's
have
true.
You voted in Virginia?
I have. It's the only state I voted in this time.
Good.
I try to keep it. I try to keep the numbers low in terms of number of states I voted, not like other weirdos like Ann Coulter or something. But
yes,
I voted. I voted on the last day of early voting, which was Saturday for us, and went smoothly, and no immediate problems. But it was interesting. It's been increasingly weird to go. You always go to the polls and you get pressured by people on the way in. I'm used to that. But this time the Republican tables were weirder and more QAnon-y than usual. So that was a little bit disturbing. So, a lot of people, instead of, hey, would you like a Republican ballot, was, do you want to help stop George Soros?
Yeah.
So, okay, no, but, that's not happening. They didn't mention any litter boxes to me. That was
that's
news.
good.
But, I vote in Loudoun County, and it's been a hotbed of weirdness lately, and it shows at the polls as people are there in their Glenn Youngkin T-shirts, who's not up for re-election, and will never be because we're a one-term governor state, but like he's not on the ballot. What are you doing? Why are you in a Glenn Youngkin shirt? You could be in any generic Republican shirt. Maybe one of the candidates running today would be glad if you were in their shirt.
That is odd.
I just found that kind of strange. So it might be just that polling station. But anyway, have you had your chance to vote?
Yes.
You vote. Oh, you're in Oregon, so you mailed
Oregon's vote by mail. I dropped my ballot off at the library on Saturday, which just, would have driven the MAGA folks absolutely wild.
Right. They probably have books and everything in there.
Voting at a library.
Right. You were probably there to take out all sorts of books about evil, Satanistic something or others.
Yes.
All right. So a drop box at the library.
Dropbox, they really would freak out because it's
everything.
An open bin. There is an election worker there washing stuff, but there's a bin sitting inside the library where you can use the book drop if you don't want to go inside.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or you can just go put it in the box that's sitting there.
A bin. All right, and it's open, so anybody could put anything in it. Of course, everybody would see it, but that doesn't mean you can't put anything in it. So, all right. Well, you voted totally legally and everything, and they, I imagine, collected those ballots. So they didn't go through the mail.
You can put it through the mail.
I mean, you can, but your Dropbox doesn't.
I wanted to go to the library anyway.
Oh, so convenient. Very nice.
Yes.
Okay. And everything's correctly filled out and dated.
Everything's correctly filled out. It has been received.
Oh,
Oregon
already.
handles this very well. Hopefully it continues to handle this very well, and hopefully we continue to have a Democratic governor who makes it all go smoothly.
Right. I guess that would be part of the agenda of a QAnon curious Republican governor would be, we need to prove that we were right about this by destroying everything.
Right.
Oh, great. Okay. So it's nice, though, that it's an organized way of collecting the ballots and getting them and shipping them and processing them quickly, and it doesn't depend on the Postal Service, which may or may not still be under the influence of Trumpsters, etc. So it's like you've got things done right there. Time to change direction and hire an incompetent as your governor, obviously.
Not so obvious Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, one of the things that she's been doing, or maybe it's Lauren Boebert, as House Minority Leader, she's led the walkouts. I don't know if you remember this, the numerous times that the Republicans have basically shut down Oregon government by walking out to deny a quorum. I don't know, 5 of those, I think, she's led.
Wow, all right.
In the House. And also the tactic of forcing the clerk to read every single piece of legislation in full before it can be voted on. So she's really employed that kind of process terrorism.
Yeah, I see.
I don't know what you would call it.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, so Murdery Trader Green has learned that trick. And I don't know which one learned it first, but I guess if they've been doing it 5 times, maybe they were working on it at the state level.
Yeah, I think probably in Oregon first, thanks to her.
All right. Well, those tactics are spreading, and although if Republicans take control in the U.S. House, she'll have committee assignments again. I don't know that means she shows up at the committee assignments.
Oh, she'll show up at the committee if she's on oversight.
Oh, if she has
a nightmare if this happens.
Yeah, I would see her. Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I guess if she had a chance to grill somebody, but does she stay and listen to the rest? I mean, none of the other members do, so she'd be out of there.
She'll do a Jim Jordan, she might actually want to stay and harass witnesses.
That's possible. Yell at other members.
Yeah.
While they're doing their questioning. So, yeah, it'll be, I guess you could call it interesting to watch to see what she does. But, and I suppose if Republicans are in the majority, then she won't be on the floor disrupting things because she'll agree with the things that are going on. So instead, she'll be disrupting, even though they're in the majority, she'll still be disrupting committee happenings. Maybe that's it.
Undoubtedly.
Okay.
I mean, that's
So
her
a clearer
job.
picture of what she'll be doing.
And Kevin McCarthy is empowering this. Kevin
Yes.
McCarthy is embracing this. Kevin McCarthy is endorsing this.
Kevin McCarthy has no
and
choice.
promoting it
Right.
by allowing her to be a voice in his caucus.
Yeah.
So,
nothing he can do about it if he hopes to gain control of that caucus and actually lead it. They will throw him out in a heartbeat if he doesn't let the nuttiest of them run wild, I assume. So
absolutely.
Real
so
treats we're in for.
It's 11 o'clock there, your time now?
Yes.
Yes. So folks have starting on your coast.
Yes.
7-ish hours to get out the vote to prevent this from happening.
That's right.
8 hours as you move further west. 9 hours and 10 hours as you get all the way across the country. So,
man, in Hawaii, you'll be voting for another week or something like that.
Yeah,
probably,
right.
You know, very
out the vote, folks. If you haven't found something that you can do, go to Daily Coast GOTV. Go to and I'm drawing a blank. DailyCoast/GOTV to find out how you can still help this day. And if you're going to the polls, make sure you have your election protection phone numbers handy.
Right, and all of that posted in your most recent story, too, in case there's any problems. Keep those numbers handy. I'll send you the link to that. Thanks, Joan. When we talk again, nothing will be clear, but the voting will be over.
NetworksRadio.com.
That's all we can hope for.
Okay. Thanks, Joan. Hang in there. Hope your eye gets better.
Bye-bye.
All right, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He'll take another crack at it today as his power's been restored, and that's good news. What's he got on his plate for today? It's not a literal plate, but let's see. Arizona, they're on the docket here for today. I'm not going to have a chance to tell you. You know what? We'll just hand it over and let him rip.